मेदिनि विश्वविनोदिनि नन्दिनुते गिरिवरविन्द्य शिरोदिनि वासिनि विष्णुविलासिनि जिष्णुनुते भगवति हेशिति कण्ठकुटुम्बिनि भूरि कुटुम्बिनि भूरि कृते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते सुरवरवर्षिणि दुर्धरदर्शिनि दुर्मुखमर्षिणि हर्षरते त्रिभुवनपोषिणि शङ्करतोषिणि किल्बिषमोषिनि घोषरते धनुजनि रोषिनि दितिसुतरोषिनि दुर्मथतोषिनि सिन्धुसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते
Hi guys, I hope the audio is coming fine. Yeah, thank you for joining the live stream. So we are back with our third live stream today. In this video, we are going to discuss Dr. Abhijit Banerjee, Nobel laureate, and he works in the researches in the realm of something called developmental economics, which is also the field popularized by Dr. Amartya Sen. And I've heard rumors that this year, the person who's going to win the Nobel Prize again in economics, another Bengali, Dr. Moitrish Ghotok, he also works in the field of developmental economics. So here, it's a very interesting speech, hardly a 45-minute speech, and he speaks very slow, so we are going to watch it at 1.5x without any problem. He discusses the future of inequality because there's of course, statistically speaking, a rise in income inequality, but we'll try to understand from his speech at least whether it's really a significant problem or not. Just mentioning a random factoid with words that seem very sad or evil or dangerous does not make that concept or phenomenon inherently or obviously sad or dangerous, right? Like if I say, oh my god, what a cute puppy, it does not make that puppy dangerous just because I'm saying it that way, okay? Or I hold a cute puppy and say, oh, a dangerous puppy, it's still a cute puppy. So let's see what conclusions he draws. I'll be in a hurry, so I'm not getting into the comment section. But yes, hi Abhishek Bhupendra, RS, long live Shakti. Yes, Jai Shri Ram, Hindu Vichardhara ma'am. Shekhar is saying facts, dropping facts. So yeah, let's start the video then.
In many countries, not all actually, I'll come having me for government programs in improving individuals' lives, particularly in areas like education and healthcare, etc. Their research has a profound impact on economics and opened a new paradigm for empirical research in economics. Today, Professor Banerjee will talk about the future of inequality and share his intuition on this important topic. He will first give us a keynote speech for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have some discussion for about 30 minutes, followed by Q&A session for the audience in the floor. And this section will be finished with short closing remarks by Professor Banerjee. Professor Banerjee, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be addressing this very important event, and I'm very grateful to be invited. My topic is the future of inequality, but I don't have a crystal ball. So mostly what I'll talk about is the past of inequality. That's all we can really talk about, because the only guidance we have, in a sense, is past plus some maybe some contemporary evidence and some theory. And so,
yeah, Nanadvaya. Yes, I think when we were cavemen, essentially, early man, back then we had almost some kind of equality because everyone was equally poor, everyone was equally vulnerable. But even then, whoever was the most brutal and had some genetically gifted physical strength, even that person would have access to most numbers of women and most amounts of resources. So tab bhi equality nahi tha, but it was closest to whatever the communist dream is. Jai Shri Ram, Ninar.
If you let me start with the past, and in particular, I don't want to start with the long past. I just want to observe that we are currently in many countries, not all actually. I'll come to that, in a really somewhat exceptional point in the history of inequality. For a range of countries that includes China, India, Japan, the United States, Korea, and of course many other countries, the inequality that we measure now, let's say measured by the ratio of the incomes of the top 10% to the incomes of the bottom 50%, are at historical highs. They've never been this high since we have measured data. Doesn't mean that 600 years ago it wasn't higher, but since we've had data, so in many countries that data goes back to 1900. And since 1900, we are now at global heights of inequality. In these countries, in many countries, we are.
Well, hopefully he'll be fair with his arguments, but so far, did you notice something about the countries he mentioned? Yes, they are the richest, most prosperous countries, which he points out has the highest amounts of inequality. And as you all know, if there's any remotely free market, pro-libertarianism kind of a person here, they know what's going on here. For the absolute commies or socialists for the first time who are in my live stream today, who are perhaps going to subscribe only to comment and then going to unsubscribe, for them, here's some basic facts. How wealth is created, how wealth gets usually in the hands of most amounts of people, how people come out of poverty is that people are always, let's say, a theoretical starting point is everyone is equally poor. Like maybe it could be argued in places like Sudan, although there are rich warlords and stuff. No one is, see, the richest of the richest, okay, in any country, no matter how corrupt or beautiful its political system or its economic system, no matter how communist or socialist or how libertarian its economic or political system, the richest of the rich are always richest of the rich, regardless of the situation, okay? In every country, there is always a section which is absolutely insanely rich. What your economics is like in the country, or what your society and corruption level, what are the powers of the government in a society, that predicates how much is there a chance for other people to also become rich, or at least to come out of poverty or some sort of economic mobility, okay? But there will always be rich people in every country. Now, since in places like Bangladesh or Sudan, who don't feature in Dr. Abhijit Banerjee's examples here among countries who have rising income inequality, so in those places, there are still the richest who are magnitudes of times richer than the poorest person in the country. But since the number of such people is very, very low, okay, therefore they don't feature here. But unfortunately, in these richer, more prosperous countries, who are the culprits here, who have that rising income inequality, in those countries, the number of rich people is actually very high, and higher than those countries who are not culprits, and it's increasing every day in countries like India. So if we are at a theoretical starting point of 100% equality, where everyone is poor because everyone can't be equally rich, so when the rise happens, it will happen like this. The gap will increase between them, but everyone will gradually get richer and have a better life. For example, in USA, the poorest are obese. Our poorest were dying of starvation up until I guess 15-20 years back. Okay, that's the difference. They're poor people, unless they're homeless. Their homelessness happens for different reasons, for their insanity with mental health drugs and insane amounts of wars. So their war veterans come out all mentally damaged and stuff. But their poor people generally have a bad TV, a bad car, a bad AC, a bad water heater. Okay, those sorts of things. Our poverty means semi-caveman like lifestyles. Okay, that's the difference. But that's of course changing now, which is why our inequality is also rising. But that is how it is. That is how money works.
More unequal now than we have been in modern memory. There are others where it's not as striking. There's a set of European countries like the UK and Italy, which used to have a very large aristocratic class. So till about 19.
By the way, the caste scholars, the wannabe caste scholars in our group here, our chat group discussion group here, ये एरिस्टोक्रेटिक क्लास क्या है? इसको क्लास हम बोल के रुक जाते हैं क्योंकि ये वेस्ट में है, मगर ये है कास्ट ही भाई। ये पूरी तरह से बर्थ बेस्ड है और एंडोगैमस है, ठीक है? ये एरिस्टोक्रेटिक क्लासेस, ये कास्ट ही है, कोई नहीं बोलेगा एकेडेमिया में इसको कास्ट, तो ठीक है।
Till the Second World War, there was a lot of inequality, but even in these countries, the current levels are higher than it ever been since the Second World War. So we're in a,
and the standard of life for humanity has not been higher up until now, for especially those countries, the culprit countries.
In a place which is unprecedented in some ways. We don't have a moment in history where we measured the data and it looked like this. Is this inevitable? Is there something about the nature of economics which makes this necessary? It makes this unavoidable.
Interesting.
I think if you look at the recent history, some things seem clear. One is that while there's a lot of countries where it happens, and if you look at the global income distribution, because these are big countries, these are countries like India, China, US, the global picture looks more like these countries. But the countries which are not following this trend, and those, those are not necessarily European social democracies. They are actually countries like Mexico, Brazil, Indonesia, Morocco, Nigeria. These are countries where you don't follow this trend. Inequality is actually going down in these countries, or flat. And it's striking that these are countries which historically have had very high levels of inequality, and inequality has been a big social problem in these countries for a long time. These are the countries where inequality has not gone up in the last 30 years or so. That's, in a sense, interesting. That it's precisely the countries that are famous for the inequality. Countries like Brazil, Nigeria, Indonesia, these are the countries where inequality.
Yes, so guys, is anybody willing to exchange their Indian citizenship for a Brazilian or Nigerian citizenship? Anybody? Raise your hands. As for Indonesia, Indonesia has already become rich. Now they don't have to become as necessarily richer every moment as we require it. So hum kya kare?
Inequality is actually either stable or falling. That's something I want to make something of that. I'll come back to that. Other fact that is very sort of striking is that the timing is quite specific. The inequality falls in all the countries I mentioned at the beginning till 1980, and then goes up. And now some of these countries like China, of course, there is a clear policy shift there. China becomes a market economy in 1979, or begins to become one. And so you see why it's happening. But in others, it's a turnaround that actually deserves an explanation. So it's the bottom of this curve of inequality is around 1980. Now, what happens in 1980? One thing that happens, and I live in the US, so it's maybe an overly US-centric perspective, is that Ronald Reagan becomes president of the US and Margaret Thatcher becomes prime minister of the UK in 79. And the first thing that immediately happens is that the marginal tax rate, the tax rate on the rich, in the US goes from 70% to less than 40% immediately. Okay, that's was part of the Reagan program. So he's not saying that there's a secret. This is what was meant to happen. The second thing that happens is that there is a very clear discourse in my field in economics, and I was actually a student in the early 1980s, which is basically saying inequality is necessary for growth. This claim was being made. So there was a very much political and pseudo-scientific, perhaps, argument saying inequality is, don't worry about inequality is the nature of things. We by not allowing inequality, we have actually slowed down growth.
And we have actually I have started the live stream with that allegedly pseudo-scientific claim as well.
To have growth, we'll have lots of inequality. I think I want to make a distinction in that within that statement between countries like China and North Korea now, which have a economic system which very, very strongly discourages inequality by controlling every economic activity. And so when you open up the economic activity, some inequality will be created. And countries like US, which were always free market economics. Is it actually true? So the claim was very much that inequality is needed. I'll actually say one more thing. The other thing that happens, taxes go down, is that inequality, because it becomes legitimate within firms, the CEOs start paying themselves very high salaries. The ratio of the CEO salary to the salary of the lowest paid employee in large firms goes from a factor of 60 to a factor of 6,000, 100 times increase in the ratio of the CEO pay to the pays of the workers. So it's the lowest paid workers. So that's a number that is rather, and this is a consequence.
Anand, it's going on somewhere in Japan or Korea, I think. But my point is, wait, listen to this argument. Yeah, so CEOs ka salary. How many CEOs really draw a high salary these days, because they have most of their cash held up in stocks, no? So when they have to pay taxes, they sell their shares, and that's when again the prices of the shares go down. Again, the middle class is the loser in that case as well. But if you have too much of income, then you have to pay too much of income taxes, so it's not like they even pay themselves too much of a salary. But again, these are philosophical and moral questions, not really economic questions. That is the CEO doing a more tough job than the lowest earner, or is the CEO doing a more irreplaceable job than the lowest earner? And who do you think everyone wants to pay? A person whose job is easily replaceable, or a person who is working hard allegedly?
To the pays of the workers. So it's the lowest paid workers. So that's a number that is rather, and this is a consequence of an ideological move which says that it's legitimate. CEOs deserve, because they are producing so much, they deserve this pay, and that workers are not very useful, so they can be paid less. So it was a clear ideological move that made it happen. Now, is it actually true that inequality generates growth? So
he is obviously insinuating that it's not true, that that CEOs deserve more and stuff. But if it was not true, if left to people's own ways of doing things, and not the government teaching everyone like as if the citizens are toddlers, the opposite would have happened. If that was the let's say the uh, if that was the true case, that actually CEOs don't deserve that much of money, and every laborer and every employee deserves as much as the CEO. No, it's just about who is more replaceable.
of course, the obvious example is what happened in the US and the UK after they cut taxes and let inequality explode. Well, the reason they did it was that growth was slowing in these countries. The fast growth period from about 1945 to 1972, 73 stops, and the countries are worried that growth is stalling. So they decide that they have to increase inequality. To do that, inequality goes up massively, as I said. Growth does not. Growth remains exactly, well, it goes down and stays down. Across the world, you can look at the correlation between changes in inequality and changes in growth. And I have some research on this.
Wait, who increases inequality deliberately, and which countries' growth did not increase, but only inequality increased? Which countries in which phases?
And there is no correlation. There's no relationship. If you look at the level of inequality and the level of growth, meaning do more unequal countries grow faster? The answer is no, they grow slower. But maybe that's spurious, but certainly there's no evidence that increasing inequality promotes growth. Is there a
Inequality is a side effect. Income inequality is a side effect. No one targets and plans their economy to create inequalities, unless it's a dictatorship where anyone can get away with doing anything. But in civilized, legit countries, that is not how things are done. Income inequality just happens. You don't have to target it.
do more unequal countries grow faster? The answer is no, they grow slower. But maybe that's spurious, but certainly there's no evidence that increasing inequality promotes growth.
Income inequality of course can happen because of other reasons as well, because of sheer corruption, like countries like Sudan and Bangladesh and stuff, where there is ever encompassing, forever going on corruption and stuff. Okay, there's no legit middle class. It's only the absolutely filthy, corrupt, rich topmost class, and there's the dirt poor class. Okay, so of course those countries also have income inequality, and their income inequality might also go on increasing, and it's not going to contribute to growth. But it's not the case with other countries who are growing, whose side effect is income inequality.
Is there a very strong theoretical argument for the relationship between inequality and growth? Well, there is an argument which is the typical one that Ronald Reagan, for example, used, which is the argument of that you need incentives. Now, you do need, I don't know that I'm not about to say that you don't need any incentives, but the elasticity of effort, how hard you work as a function of the tax rate in rich countries, among rich people, is very, very low. And that's not surprising. If you look at the recent biography of Elon Musk, it says that he's obsessive. He can't stop working. It's not an accident.
Right.
These people got there because they are obsessed with working.
Right.
And that's what you see very much, that the elasticity of... Now, what happens when you raise tax rates is they stop paying taxes. They move the country money to tax havens, so they don't pay taxes. But it's not that the tax collection goes down, but that I'll come back to that point at the end. But it's not because people are not working. It's because they are just cheating the government. At the bottom of the distribution.
Okay, so Elon Musk is cheating the government. which is another way of saying that what he paid about $2 billion last year in taxes, right? I don't remember the exact amount. So whatever's the amount, let's say 500 rupees. In what world is 500 rupees going to be spent more efficiently with less corruption in the hands of a government person, in the hands of a babu, than in the hands of a passionate entrepreneur like Elon Musk? Now, of course, all companies are not run by passionate people. All companies are not run by honest people. I'm not even claiming that Elon Musk is honest or dishonest man, but at least he has an incentive to be so. Okay, otherwise his SpaceX rockets won't reach the space. Otherwise, his Teslas will be like our ambassadors. Okay, so there's a basic, at least philosophical notion of some incentives that an entrepreneur must follow, because his company must do well. He doesn't have job security as a CEO, everything that a government servant has, in whose hands that 500 rupees is not going to be better spent. It's going to be always better spent in the hands of Elon Musk. So it's not called, it's, we beg to differ with Dr. Abhijit Banerjee here. It's very disgraceful to call it cheating.
In the other side of this is at the bottom of the distribution, redistribution, which also gets slowed by this. Of course, if once you stop collecting taxes, then you can't redistribute, so redistribution goes down. The evidence suggests that if anything, these have very positive effects. That people, and you can see that US as a country which, when it used to be much less unequal, it used to be a country which was much more socially mobile than most European countries. Some you can measure.
Well, economically mobile and socially mobile are not the same things. Which one does he mean, and does he say what he actually means? And what is the rate of illegal immigration? Because let's say you have 500 people and you claim to have created a system where there is insane amounts of free market and mobility and stuff. Okay, so among those 500 people, let's say 100 people were poor to begin with, or 200 people were poor to begin with, and those 200 people have come out of poverty. Not everyone can come out of poverty, because some people will just have too much laziness, low IQ, or just simply won't have the brains to work hard, or just won't work hard. So let's say 50 people remain poor even after that change you brought into the country. Among those 200 people, 190 people move from poverty level to middle class level. Now, what happens is 200 people enter the country as illegal immigrants. Now the population of the country is no longer 500 people. It's in fact 700 people. And the 190 people who reach the middle class is replaced by another 200 poor people. Now you have 250 people among 700 total population who are extremely poor. So how are you going to count your mobility then? That's what also happens with us. There's so much illegal immigration from Bangladesh. Half of our poverty statistics would disappear if we were able to stop 100% the Bangladeshi illegal infiltration. That's not going to happen. So the examples of the eras of USA he's describing. So at one point there was no illegal immigration, and then there was huge amounts of illegal immigration, which also happened because they raised the minimum wage bar, listening to commie academics, and then their products and their services were not able to compete with anybody else's products anywhere else on earth. So they had to import illegal immigrants so that they could use them to build stuff at $5 or $2 or something hypothetically low per hour. And therefore, theoretically, you could show then that the mobility of Americans decreased.
Measure social mobility in many ways, but there are measures by which US was twice as socially mobile as continental Europe. Now it's half as socially mobile. Social mobility.
What did we just discuss? Who has had more illegal immigration?
So because poor people are unable to make investments, they don't move out. For example, in the education of their children.
Yeah, and black people mostly face the lack of, or let's say, impediments in their desired path to upward mobility, because black neighborhoods have absolutely nothing resembling a law and order, and with no law and order, there aren't going to be any businesses that set up their units in those areas, because they are going to face looting and violence all the time long, and prices are going to be higher in those neighborhoods because they have to insure higher. Okay, because if those neighborhoods have more propensity for violence. And then the schools are absolutely horrible in those communities, even though the government spends more on those schools, but all that money is swallowed up by very, very, very bad teachers and teachers unions. So there's absolutely no way out for poor black people out of their misery, unless again a Ronald Reagan like president comes to power. People like Vivek Ramaswamy become the president.
You also start to see that the concentration of wealth now is really so dramatic that it's having effects on competition. I talked about the income shares of the top 10%, but a lot of the story is about the top 0.0001%. About the top 1,000 people in the world, their income growth between 1995 and 2021 was 2.5 to 3 times that of the top 1%. So the top 1% are very rich. The top 1,000 people, their income grew 3 times as much as those very rich people. So the very richest people their incomes are growing very, very fast. That reflects wealth concentration and these enormous companies, global companies that you all know about. And these companies are extraordinarily profitable, but the correlation between profitability and investment has gone down massively. So,
and if those companies were not profitable, they would not be able to hire more people, etc. You remember what kind of joblessness we used to have in India? Everyone used to beg for everything to every politician and babus. That has gone down to some extent.
It used to be that when you're profitable, you invest. But if you're profitable because you have a monopoly, then you don't need to invest, and they don't. And that's what we're seeing. So productivity growth, this as a force for productivity growth, this is a negative force. Finally, I think, of course, there is the political consequences of this growth in inequality. If you look at where did Trump get most of the votes, it got much of his votes. He got those votes from places where real wages growth was the lowest. And that's not surprising. It's exactly what you'd expect since he came on an anti-globalist platform. But this means that a set of policies are being framed by this conversation where the victims of increasing inequality are voting for people who are then not necessarily taking populist policies.
Now, Abhijit, Donald Trump was voted by people who wanted their jobs back from China. And Trump tried to do those very things. But Abhijit Banerjee is accusing Trump of not allegedly, taking steps which would have addressed the problems of the people who voted him to power. No, he tried doing exactly that. He, of course, did not receive too much support from the Republican establishment. And then he got kicked out. And I don't think he's coming back to power. And if Vivek comes to power, he's also not going to... Vivek is not coming to power, of course, in 2024, but someday, even in 28, 32, whenever he comes to power, probably, no one is going to ever get that kind of support to bring jobs back to USA. So who's Abhijit Banerjee really blaming here?
So all of this makes me think that there is no very good argument which says that inequality is essential for sustaining growth.
Has anyone said that it's essential for sustaining growth, or have people, if someone has said it, of course, they were being too cocky, and now everyone else is going to face the brunt of those statements, but it's inevitable.
Why is inequality going up? Well, I think there's several things happening. One is, I told you a little while ago that the rich are getting enormously richer. The very rich are getting enormously richer to the point where they can't spend the money. I did a small calculation of how long it would take to spend the money if you were buying, let's say, a car every month or something, and you couldn't spend the money by buying an expensive car every month. Right. You could buy a Ferrari every month, and Elon Musk wouldn't even notice the difference.
Yeah.
They cannot.
And at the same time, even in a place like West Bengal, whose GDP growth rate is 8 to 10%, whereas places like UP have a GDP growth rate of 19%, 20%, and they have a clear-cut vision of reaching $1 trillion, becoming a $1 trillion economy, whereas West Bengal has not even announced any such plans, and where he hails from, whose GDP is $240 billion. Even there, so many people, so many qualified people are becoming Swiggy and Zomato's delivery boys and girls, okay? I could, of course, use the phrase they're having to become those things because there are no other avenues, but there has been a gigantic trickle-down effect of the entire country called India's rise in wealth, which has actually affected positively West Bengal even, okay? Like what Abhijit Banerjee said a few days back when he came to Kolkata. He said that, I'm seeing so many nice restaurants coming up everywhere because, yeah, that's the case. The entire bypass. So everyone is becoming foodie and the food bloggers and stuff, food vloggers, they are also earning through YouTube. Even though India's income inequality is rising, so even in that rising income inequality, people have somehow the money to set up restaurants even after paying so much tola, and people have the money to go to those restaurants to keep those restaurants alive, and have the time and resources to make videos about it, and then also order stuff from Swiggy all the time, and people are getting jobs in Swiggy. If the rising income inequality was even worse, I mean it was actually worse, and if India's overall rise in as a rise as an economic power had not positively affected West Bengal, if it had not trickled down to West Bengal, all of these people, all of these kids who are getting jobs as Swiggy and Zomato riders, I shit you not, I bet you they would have become the next generation of Trinamool's gundas. Okay, that's the only reason they are not becoming Trinamool's gundas like in the yesteryears, when similarly qualified people would either leave for Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, USA, England, like he himself did, like Amartya Sen did, like Moitish Ghatak did. If those people had to stay back, they would be stuck in some pretty low-paying job, or would become Trinamool's gundas if they were a little less privileged in society, if they were from a bit of a lower caste, had a bit of little lesser of an education, okay, little lesser of a quality of education. So not only is it breaking it, is it the rising income inequality, it's discouraging people from becoming political gundas. It's also breaking down caste barriers. Today, for the first time, I think I'm seeing in the last 1 year or 1 year, 1.5 years, Brahmin kids, 20-year-old, 22-year-old Brahmin kids, guys, girls, delivering me food in Swiggy. That's happening because of the trickle-down effect of the phenomenal rise in economics that India as a country has done, even while its income inequality has been rising. Okay, that is the nature of economics.
Spend the money. That's why they are spending money on going to Mars, because there's no other way for them to spend the money. There is no consumption is just not. So that's reflected on the fact that if you look at the wealth share of income, how much of your income is coming from wealth, then even for the top 1%, increasing share of their income is coming from wealth. It's not coming from their labor, it's not coming from their job, it's not coming from their skills, it's coming from their wealth. The structure of global trade is another thing. As inequality, so in a sense, these are vicious cycles. As people get richer, they can't spend the money, so they get even richer. As people get richer, they demand higher quality goods, they demand branded goods.
Right.
As they demand branded goods, the companies that control those brands, and I don't necessarily just mean Samsung, I mean all the companies that are in that supply chain of Samsung, but still a small set of companies are getting huge economies of scale. They're growing extremely fast. The set of global brands are growing faster than the global economy by many times, and that reflects. And those companies are becoming incredibly profitable. So and again, because they're becoming profitable, inequality is going up. Inequality is going up means the demand for the goods they produce is going up. So there is a certain vicious cycle there. What's going to change? Well, I think right now, I don't see I think that both the tendencies I mentioned, one is the fact that the rich are making so much money that they can't spend it. And the second, that the structure of trade is one that favors global brands. Neither of them is about to change unless we change inequality.
Who makes quality branded goods, highly quality, high branded goods? मैं इंग्लिश भूल रहा हूँ इस arguments के वजह से.
Quality. The second thing that's happening is AI, and I think the evidence from AI is very tenuous because we don't really have a lot of AI. But to the extent that there is evidence, the sectors that were more ready for AI have had less.
Brings up an interesting argument, but it's like beggars can't be choosers. What Brahmins delivering Swiggy and Zomato food shows you is that these people who would have become Trinamool's more or less educated gundas, who would then go on to become MLAs and then give you a lot of good bhashan and show off their Hindu credentials by doing puja path in good polished Bengali, they are becoming Swiggy deliver boys and girls instead of becoming Trinamool's gundas. Whereas in earlier times, the lower caste people, the further uneducated people, who would have become the gundas of those educated gundas, are now becoming the power brokers in the सोसाइटी. सो ये है हमारा एक जाइगेंटिक इंप्रूवमेंट. ये हिलेरियस लग सकता है मगर यही है सोसाइटी वेस्ट बंगाल में.
wage growth. So the workers are losing. That's not surprising, but I think that what's interesting about AI and maybe different is that the set of jobs that AI is going to take away are going to be jobs that are middle skilled workers, not the lowest skilled workers, not the people who are flipping burgers in McDonald's, but the middle skilled workers across the world. So these are people who are among the best paid people in countries like India, and they are the ones who are going to be clearly, directly in the line of losing their jobs. So that's a separate problem. It's not the problem of the very poor getting poorer. In a sense, AI might actually help the very poor by making health access better. It's the middle classes and the...
Now, whether AI will wreak havoc and create mass joblessness in society and all, these are kind of philosophical questions, and we have had these conversations forever with some technology or the other. And yes, some people will definitely lose jobs, but it will again create new jobs. And as for some industries like the music industry, I have a hunch that it's kind of going to be duplicated and replicable in other industries as well. That it's the mediocre. There's going to be no place for mediocrity. And even if you don't lose your job to AI, you will lose your job to someone who uses AI better than you. So the bad musicians, bad drummers, bad guitarists, their work is already, half of their work is replaced by softwares already today. AI is going to replace it further. But people like Hans Zimmer, A.R. Rahman have not lost jobs to software, and they won't lose their jobs to AI, mind you.
Middle classes in the US, for example, who are going to get hurt, and the accountants are going to get hurt because AI will do accounting better than them, and that has major political consequences. The last piece of that story is that if you look at what's happening to elite education, it's getting incredibly expensive.
Right.
All over, there's a global demand, and that's a consequence of...
In India, why are they increasing? वो right to education हटा दो और देखो थोड़ा बहुत already democratization हो जाएगा. और वैसे भी हम इतना फ्रीबी के लिए टैक्सेस देते हैं, उसके लिए भी हमको वो मतलब अनअफोर्डेबल लगता है. मिडिल क्लास का टैक्सेस घटाओ और राइट टू एजुकेशन हटा दो, स्कूल पे फालतू प्रेशर डालना बंद करो.
Of the fear of AI, the fact that if you don't have elite skills, you won't have a job. And so education everywhere, the price is growing much faster than global GDP. And as a result, only the rich can afford it. There's a article in New York Times yesterday saying that if you look at the people with the same SAT scores, the rich, the children of the top 1% are 2.7.
Anand, are you saying therefore that in the realms other than art, AI is going to, create more, wreak more havoc than the art scene? Because in the non-art field, it's not just about human creativity; it's about, executing a job as well. But wouldn't you say that in some ways everything is art in the end? Now, if there is a person who has to regularly just handle screwdrivers, and his job is done by AI or a robot, then of course it's a problem. But then someone has to make that many numbers of robots, and if someone has made a robot that can make other robots, then of course there are other jobs that need to be done, and the other jobs that will inherently come up. I think AI will dominate in management, right? And first of all, the best of the best are not going to be replaced by AI. But yes, some people are definitely losing jobs. But you see, when time gets freed up for those jobless people, and your joblessness allowance is not higher than your salary, then truly innovations can happen in realms that AI has not even thought of doing yet.
2.7 times as likely to be admitted to an elite institution than the average. And for the bottom 20%, that's 20% less than the average. And so that's from AI to a sort of a demand for elite school skills, and from elite skills to elite schools, and a mechanism for exclusion. What do we do? I'm going to spend
mechanism for exclusion. अरे भाई आरटी करके exclusion के नाम पे और भी गड्ढे में चला गया सब कुछ.
Very little time on that. Maybe we can talk about that as we go. I think first thing is we need to change the tax treatment of AI, of investment. And investment is subsidized. Investment in new investments, many countries subsidize investments. Investments right now taking from AI. So the substitution of AI for workers is actually tax subsidized. Secondly, the tax subsidy is actually very largely underestimated, because when a worker loses his job, the state supports him. That's not in any capitalist calculus. And therefore, the 25% of the worker's income or 30% of the worker's income that the capitalist, now he doesn't pay the worker, worker has been fired, the state is taking care of him, that 30% is also a tax subsidy effectively. So we're really we have a very distorted pricing of AI.
Now, if that tax subsidy happens because of government corruption, i.e., some government babu or minister colludes with the capitalists sneakily behind doors, is of course a different matter. But if that tax subsidy is given to attract more investment and create more jobs in some locality, then of course it's not a problem.
Second, I think we have to directly take on wealth accumulation. Wealth taxes and estate taxes are needed. And to do that, we need to think of tax havens. I think there should be a global agreement to ban tax havens, personally. I've been saying this for 15 years. This is not a lot of take up, but there's a little bit more interest now in that idea. It's really essential. One place where AI can be very useful is in identifying.
Yeah, on the context of what M. Shastri is pointing out here, I won't say the data and stuff, but check out Sandeep Balakrishna's recent video on Amartya Sen, okay?
Where in the near future we're going to see,
from his channel called Dharma Dispatch,
major shocks. Where will the jobs disappear? If we know that, we can anticipate that, we can actually help people move out of those sectors, anticipate it, build it in, create, retrain, subsidize. So I think that's actually going to be very, very critical. While there are programs like that, and the US has what is called the trade adjustment allowance, they are really not used. So far, people just, when they lose their jobs, they lose their jobs. And that's part of the reason for Trump support, for example. And let me just, last thing I want to say is that I think, and we need to redistribute in ways that are less humiliating. I think the idea that unemployment is your fault is something that has to go, especially if AI is the source of it and global trade is the source of it, then we really can't let people blame themselves. In the US, the death rates among the white population in the last 4 years have been so high that the white population, for the first time since 1919, the life expectancy of the white population is falling. And it's a combination of drugs, alcoholism, suicide. If we think that the middle classes are going to be hurt a lot, and these are people with a lot of...
drugs, alcoholism and drugs both have, consumption of both, especially alcoholism, has increased because of jobs getting shifted to China, and obesity being called beautiful. Everyone is beautiful in their own way. That has also hurt a lot. And their insane diets, cow heavy, pig heavy diet, which clogs every heart artery and chokes them to death at 42. All those things have contributed.
Of self-worth, then I feel that we need to do something about it. So I realize that I didn't cheer you up a lot, but maybe we can talk about policy solutions as we go from here. Thank you.
Now, as for the tax havens thing, the ban of tax havens, that is of course important. And what happens is, something interesting had been pointed out by that financial markets course I had taken in Coursera. It was done by a Nobel laureate from Yale University. So, and it was, I think, pointed out by the economic advisor of Ronald Reagan. It's mostly true in most cases that when your tax rates are high officially, legally, then your tax revenue collection is actually relatively lower than if you had your tax rates lower. Okay, because let's say your salary is 100 rupees and the tax is 30 rupees. So in order to not pay that 30 rupees, you sent it away to some tax haven or some Swiss bank and stuff. But you have to end up spending 15 rupees. So चलो सब मिला के आई गेस 40 तक हो सकता है. नहीं, तुम्हारा एक्सपेंडिचर, हाँ, तो वो 15 रुपए ही लग गया. Magar, if and it's illegal, of course, but if your salary is 100 rupees and your country asks you to pay 20 rupees tax, not 15, 20, then you pay 20 here only because you don't have to go through the hassles of illegality and you are not paying the extra amount there. So you pay it legally 20 and then more people end up paying the taxes. So actually tax revenue collection goes up when tax rates are lower.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you much for your
M. Shastri, the bigger question here. M. Shastri is saying Abhijit Banerjee earns close to $300,000 per year. That's a huge tax subsidy. I'm sure you can give that grant money to a 5-6. Yeah, redistribute his wealth to some poor schools. But more importantly, when he sets up his research lab, why does he do it in Hindutva fascist UP and not West Bengal, progressive West Bengal? That's the fun part.
insight. And Professor Banerjee told us that the global inequality is worsening significantly, and it causes a lot of problem in worldwide. So I think this is no exception for Korea. So let's talk about this unique situation in Korea. For doing that, I must confess that I'm not expert in development economics, so I'm not familiar with the literature. So I look at the.
You seem to know a lot, actually. I saw what you wrote.
Well, I look at the dictionary.
Rishi is saying, who is this guy? अरे मुझको बोल रहा है कि अभिजीत बनर्जी को बोल रहा है? ऋषि कहाँ से आए तुम अभी अचानक? अरे अभी अभी नींद से उठे क्या 10 साल बाद?
Of the definition of inequality, and it says that inequality refers to unequal or unjust distribution of resources and opportunity among members of a society, right? So I think this concept has a different meaning in different contexts, and it is not easy to measure, but I think all the concepts are kind of related. So I think in any case, it is bad for society because it weakens the strong bonds among people. Also, it leads to political polarization and restrict social mobility. Also, it may lower economic growth. You said they are not correlated, but I agree that inequality does not boost economic growth, but excessive inequality may hamper or disturb this economic growth. Because
Shuddha, in theory, it's not a completely unreasonable proposition, but I don't know if it has any basis in reality, because a person whose job is being lost to AI, अचानक उसको कुछ अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट अलाउंस मिलने से या फिर कुछ बेनिफिट कंपनी से ही मिलने से अचानक वो क्रिएटिव जॉब में घुस जाएगा, ऐसा एज्यूम करने का कोई जरूरत नहीं है. I mean, he can be given some allowance for one generation. Of course, I am in favor of people getting benefits for having their data farmed out to everyone. Yes. तो वो क्रिएटिव जॉब में घुसाएगा कि नहीं, क्रिएटिव जॉब में खुद घुसेगा कि नहीं, that's not even the question. He can invest in some restaurant or some stocks. We don't care about that, of course. So that part is fine. Phone number? No, I haven't.
So you have conflict, social conflict. And as you know, Korea is well known for its rapid growth, economic growth, and social cohesion. And one of the sources, I think, of the social cohesion is that this society is very homogeneous with most people a single race. And this homogeneity also makes this inequality matters a lot in our society. So there was a famous Korean proverb saying that,
yeah, as long as it is just one generation. अभी मतलब 50 साल में पहले मेरे दादाजी ने AI के सामने जॉब खोया था, अब मुझे कुछ बेनिफिट दो, वो चुतियापा फिर से शुरू होगा तो उसमें भी प्रॉब्लम है. At this point, someone who has just joined the workforce, 22, maybe 24, 25, and in 1 or 2 years he loses his job. Yes, he does deserve some allowance and stuff, probably, if it's not coming at the cost of taking away more jobs, as in the company shifting elsewhere with those kinds of threats, then of course it can be done.
If my stomach hurts if my cousin buys land, that means that I'm super jealous of the prosperity of other people. So in that sense, inequality matters a lot in Korea, and people care too much about others' behavior. So thank you very much for raising this issue today in Korea. So before we start, let me give you some statistics on welfare statistics. So in Korea, income inequality and relative poverty rose substantially.
Rupa Shah, conclusion of his talk so far is that but tax rates need to be higher, AI tax rates need to be higher, and tax havens should be abolished, and every country must collaborate on that. But he's going to further elaborate upon it based on what questions he gets.
Substantially, especially after 1997 Asian financial crisis, and have remained.
Retroev, for now, off the top of my head, what we are discussing based on what Shuddha Roy discussed here is the employees themselves.
Persistently high in recent years. So if you look at the Gini coefficient, which is a measure of inequality, income inequality, is like 0.333. It's a bit increasing. And the income quantile share ratio, which is the ratio of the top to the bottom 20% income, is like almost 6 times. So the bottom top 20% earns about 6 times more than bottom top 20% people. And the relative poverty rate, which is the proportion of people with less than 50% of the median income, is 15%. So these numbers are relatively very high in OECD countries. Also, we are experiencing a rapid demographic changes. So because of population aging and low birth, so proportion of the population over 65 is 17.5%, which is already very high, and they're expected to increase to 46% in 2070. So almost half of the people in 50 years from now will be over 65. And total fertility rate is extremely low, lowest in the world. It's like 0.78. So given this situation, we are facing a substantial pressure on public spending for this welfare. Also, we have another restriction because
their fertility rates are also in the dustbin.
We have a geopolitical risk because we are facing North Korea. So we have to be very cautious in increasing the public spending too much on welfare.
Buddhadeva Bhattacharya here is asking a larger, actually philosophical question here, that why are they bothered about income inequality anyway? Now, income inequality as a topic is of course a romantic topic. So for that reason, someone or the other will be always bothered. We don't know how much South Korea as a country is bothered about this topic. It's just one event being hosted. Okay. So, but no matter which country on earth, even if Thomas Sowell is the president of a country, someone or the other will host a conference on income inequality. But the question is, why is Abhijit Banerjee getting his PhD from a first world country? Why is he getting his Nobel Prize funding from a first world country? Why does he live in a first world country? Why doesn't he live in those glorious income, apparently low income inequality countries like Brazil and Nigeria? Why aren't there economic conferences discussing income inequality in countries like Brazil and Nigeria? That's where the answer to your question lies, basically.
So given this restriction, it would be very important to find out cost-effective solutions to reduce inequality. So, and strengthening social safety net. So I would like to discuss some policies to reduce these inequality and promote social mobility, especially in Korea, because you are in Korea. Okay. So before I start, maybe I have a personal question. So you are expert in developed economics. So how you became interested in developed economics, especially in alleviating poverty issues? Do you have any motivation?
Well, you know, I grew up in India. I in fact, maybe just by accident, even though my family was perfectly comfortably middle class, I grew up right next to one of the big.
Perfectly middle class, no? Yeah, both of his parents are academics. Okay. Let's just Google Abhijit Banerjee a little. Let's see when he left Kolkata. In which phase? Let's track his life a little. When did you graduate out of presidency? So yeah, University of Calcutta, 1981. Okay, so he was in Presidency College, 1981. 4 years after CPIM came to power, he goes to Delhi in 1983, or completes in 1983. Goes to Harvard in 1988. And where are Deepak Banerjee was a professor of economics, his father, okay, at Presidency College, Calcutta. His father, Deepak Banerjee, received his PhD from LSE, from where the place where Jawaharlal Nehru, our Nupur Sharma, and Ambedkar, everyone studied there. And his mother, Nirmala Patankar Banerjee, was a professor at the Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Calcutta. So yeah, I think it's pretty much better than middle class, okay, guys, compared to what Kolkata is. And attended secondary school at South Point, Kolkata, one of the most elite institutions. You could call South Point the biggest NRI factory of West Bengal. Then ISI, presidency, yeah, okay. Middle class as fuck.
grew up in India. In fact, maybe just by accident, even though my family was perfectly comfortably middle class.
No, Buddhadev, you see, in the late 80s, when he is studying in those colleges, or at least when his parents are already professors, they might be paid less compared to today. But in presidency, and especially compared to the other job opportunities in West Bengal and Kolkata, compared with those things.
I grew up right next to one of the biggest slums, literally right next. We were the last house. My grandfather very cleverly bought a plot, which turned out to be one of the worst investments you could have made. It was right next to a slum, so it was very hard to sell the land. And as a result,
So Abhijit Banerjee is a slumdog millionaire.
I had lots of exposure to poverty from day one. I can't remember a time when I didn't know about deep poverty. So
oh, exposure to poverty, not being poor. Oh my God. So he has been exposed to poverty, as in he saw from his window, poor people. I thought I'll be fully respectful of him in the entire live stream. What is he saying?
It was this is in the 1960s when people in India were much poorer than now. I mean,
oh, when income inequality was not rising like today.
We lived next to in the same place till very recently. So I saw the change, and it was even though there are many things that I'm not satisfied with. It's clear that the very poor all over the world have become less poor in the last.
Thomas Sowell तभी जिंदा है, उसका आत्मा बोलने वाला था. Thomas Sowell is definitely watching from somewhere, from some deep corner of the world.
40 years, and you see that very much, that everybody has clothes, everybody's doesn't look like they're starving. Some changes have happened, but it was very much that. So I don't think I had a choice. At some level, if you're an economist and you grew up with that, it's hard to imagine.
What does it mean, grew up with that? Where is mysterious sociologist? Koi bulao isko.
Sort of saying, well, no, I'm going to, and in fact, I'm trained as an economic theorist, and I was even I taught economic theory for many years at places like MIT. So it's not for particularly because this was my training. In fact, I had no training in development economics. I trained myself, but in the end, it's very hard to resist that compulsion.
I see. I heard that both of your parents are professor of economics.
Correct.
And it's very depressing that professors in India doesn't make so much money.
अब किसको बिठा के हम इंग्लिश ग्रामर सिखाए? इसने बोल दिया कि मैंने भाई अपने विंडो से देख लिया, पॉवर्टी तो मैं हो गया पॉवर्टी पे एक्सपोज्ड, और इसके दिमाग में घुसा के अच्छा तो प्रोफेसर इतने पुअर है कि स्लम के पास रहना पड़ता है भोसरी के. एंड his Brahmin, of course. It's not like it's nothing. Mysterious sociologist Thomas Sowell, सब देखो क्या बोला जा रहा है यहाँ पे.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
We were not particularly. In a sense, we had a very everything was very close to being the margin always.
Okay, so the next.
Yes, because the country in general was poor as fuck back then, when there was no rising income inequality. I thought I'll be respectful the entire live stream.
Question will be on old age poverty. Okay, so poverty in Korea is concentrated mostly among elderly, and the relative poverty rate among the
elderly anchor bhi wapas fertility rate pe aa gaya.
Which has aged more than 65 is about 40%. It's OECD average like in 13%, which is very high, highest in OECD countries. Also, the Gini coefficient for the elderly group is also very high, which means that there's a lot of income inequality among the elderly population as well. So I don't have any data on absolute poverty, but it's likely to be significant, especially for the elderly living alone without family support. So Korea has some multi-pillar system, like a basic livelihood security program or basic pension system, but so far it has been insufficient to prevent high poverty rate.
Most of it is contributory?
Sorry?
Most of it is still contributory pension?
Pension. So we have a basic pension also, the national basic pension.
But then there is contributory pension.
Yeah, it's
you based on your working history.
Oh, I see. The selection criteria.
No, is most of the pension payment coming from what you accumulated during your working life?
No, this is different. That is called just a national pension. This basic pension is only applies to elderly. It gives to about 70% of elderly people. and it gives about 300,000, like in $230. So it's given almost all elderlies. But we also have national pension, so it depends on how much you accumulate throughout your
That's what
life.
I was asking.
Yes, we have national. But it was introduced relatively late. Recently, it started in 1999. So many of the elderly do not receive the pension. So that's why the cause of the poverty. So government is now trying to reform the pension system, but has not made a big progress yet because it requires social consensus. And one of the main difficulties coming from intergenerational conflicts, as you can imagine, because younger generations may have to pay more and receive less to sustain this pension system. It is difficult for the young people because after the pandemic, the housing price increased a lot, and young people cannot buy houses, and so they cannot marry. Also, they cannot find good regular jobs. So that caused a lot of frustration among young people, and they tend to have extreme self-perception. In Korean, it's called 이생망. That means that this life is hopeless, or this life is doomed, something like that. So we have some intergenerational conflict and the problem with the pension system. So what policy would you recommend to deal with this old age problem?
Okay, policy recommendations for Korea now. This will be fun. Let's check out Anushakti Nagar. Yeah, seems like a nice township, right? I guess, M. Shastri, what you will say is that it did not exist before 1991. Seems like that HCL or HLC township in Pune that has been abandoned now for some reason. What was that called? वदाला और लातविया ऐसा कुछ नाम था जहां पे सब लोग बाइक पे जाते थे. मैं सब बाइक का रिव्यू देखता था, वो वहीं पे करते थे, पावर ड्रिफ्ट वगैरह. वो किसी डैम के पास. वो बंद काहे हो गया? Abhijit Banerjee grew up in places like Anushakti Nagar. Yes. Is your typical government colony for academic? Exactly. वही तो बात है. और अभी पास में था झोपड़पट्टी, तो हमने पॉवर्टी एक्सपीरियंस कर लिया. यस, लावासा कैसे गड्ढे में चला गया भाई? महाराष्ट्र से कोई समझाओ. एक मिनट रुको, शेयर का विंडो चला गया. किसी बाबू ने तो बढ़िया कुछ मतलब चुतियापा किया है लवासा में.
That means that this life is hopeless, or this life is doomed, something like that. So we have some intergenerational conflict and the problem with the pension system. So what policy would you recommend to deal with this old age poverty problem and solve intergenerational conflicts?
I mean, I think part of the, just to say the obvious, is that reason why Korea has this and China will has it too is because these are countries that grew very fast at some point. So the people who retired 20 years ago had a lifetime earning stream, whether they saved that money or they saved in the national pension. The lifetime earning stream was very low relative to the people who are earning now. Yes. So fast-growing countries kind of inevitably have this problem. So the good news there is that as growth slows, the problem sort of somewhat solves itself. So it's a relative, because then the inequality goes down. Because
See, I now have a serious problem with this. So first of all, he alleges that people apparently in some era have strawmanned the argument and said that income inequality is what we must target in order to have a good prosperous society. But whereas we know the truth is that income inequality is just an inevitable side effect of a high growth society and prosperous society. Now he's doing the opposite and doing the same thing basically, and he's saying that we must target equality even if it means growth getting slower, okay, because we'll solve the problem apparently. What the hell? How are we supposed to stay respectful in while facing such conversations and discourses from people who live in the United States and have studied and done everything in the United States or in some other first world country?
So the good news there is that as growth slows, the problem sort of somewhat solves itself. So it's a relative, because then the inequality goes down because the young are not much richer than the people who are reaching a pension age now had high wages for a long time. Yes. Whereas people who reached pension age 20 years ago had high wages, almost never had high wages. So therefore, I think the problem will bit solve it. Part of it will be solved. That's the good news, I think.
Okay.
Just that's the demographer's point of view, but I think there is some truth to it. On the other side, I would say that
So you see how caste is related to West Bengal's politics? Because who are the biggest fanboys of Abhijit Banerjee in West Bengal? Okay, people who have not even been to US and all, who are not really the beneficiaries of a first world free market economy. Okay, to whatever degree there is a free market in the first world countries today. It's mainly the upper caste commies. Okay, Brahman, Boiddo and Kayasto caste commies who live in the best situations. जो कोलकाता का बेस्ट सिचुएशन वैसे भी शायद बाकी देश के बाकी जो मतलब मेट्रो सिटीज है आज के दिन में उनके तुलना में कोलकाता का बेस्ट सिचुएशन भी शायद बस्ती ही है. बट इवन देन बेस्ट सिचुएशन में बैठ के ऐसे चुतियापा आर्ग्यूमेंट्स को फॉलो करने के लिए जो प्रिविलेज चाहिए जिंदगी में, वो प्रिविलेज सिर्फ और सिर्फ ब्राह्मण, बौद्ध और कायस्थों के पास है. और बाकी जो लोअर कास्ट लोग हैं उनको तो आइदर लक्ष्मीर भंडार मिलता है या फिर तृणमूल के गुंडे बन गए हैं, या फिर गांडू लोगों को लगता है कि ये ब्राह्मण, बौद्ध, कायस्थो जो बोल रहे हैं वही ठीक है, तो इसलिए चलो अभिजीत बनर्जी ठीक है, ठीक बोल रहे हैं, या चलो सोशलिज्म ठीक है.
I think again years ago had high wages, almost never had high wages. So therefore, I think the problem will bit solve it. Part of it will be solved. That's the good news, I think.
Okay.
Just that's the demographer's point of view, but I think there is some truth to it. On the other side, I would say that I think again, rather than taxing
he doesn't know what dire fucking straits West Bengal is in. He doesn't know what's the condition of every industry in West Bengal. तो मेरा लिव्ड एक्सपीरियंस मैं मरवाऊं, ठीक है, मैं म्यूजिक इंडस्ट्री में वापस आता हूं, तो ऐसा कभी सुना है किसी इंडस्ट्री में कि कंपोजर अरेंजर से ज्यादा लाइव म्यूजिक में ज्यादा पैसा है? ठीक है, ये कहां होता है? शायद भोजपुरी इंडस्ट्री में होता होगा, या फिर ऐसे जगह में जिसका कोई सिग्निफिकेंट फिल्म इंडस्ट्री नहीं है. तो फिल्म इंडस्ट्री है ऐसा जो एक उपाधि है, ऐसा जो एक टाइटल है, ये हम किस किस इंडस्ट्री के बारे में सोचते हैं? मुंबई, केरला, तमिलनाडु और कर्नाटका, आंध्र प्रदेश और वेस्ट बंगाल, ये 6 ही तो जगह है. और इस 6 जगह के बाहर कोई तो नहीं बोलता है कि हाँ उस स्टेट में बढ़िया फिल्म इंडस्ट्री है. वेस्ट बंगाल का फिल्म इंडस्ट्री ऐसा है कि यहाँ पे टॉप कंपोजर्स लाइव शोज करते फिर रहे हैं. अरिजीत सिंह को, ए.आर. रहमान को, मतलब तुमको एक सोने का हाथी दे दो, एल्डोराडो का एड्रेस बता दो, फिर भी इन लोगों को तुम कॉन्सर्ट करने के लिए बाहर नहीं निकाल पाओगे, क्योंकि उसके लिए अलग से रिहर्सल चाहिए, जाना है इधर उधर, उतना इन लोगों को मन भी नहीं करता है. मजे से है घर में बैठ के कंपोज कर रहे हैं. कोलकाता एक ऐसा इंडस्ट्री है कि ऐसा चूतिया इकोनॉमिक्स बन गया है, ऐसा ब्लैक मनी का मतलब लेट्स से डोमिनेशन है कि लाइव म्यूजिक में ज्यादा पैसा मिलता है. ठीक है, आई नो पीपल, लेट्स से वैसे भी एक और ऐसा इंडस्ट्री में ऐसा नहीं होता है, मगर कोलकाता के फिल्म इंडस्ट्री में ऐसा है कि टॉप कंपोजर मैं अगर तुमसे पूछूं कि कौन है, तुम 2 या 3 नाम बोल पाओगे. ठीक है, तो वो 2 या 3 लोगों में से 2 लोग शोज करते हैं. उसके नेक्स्ट जनरेशन में उसके असिस्टेंट्स, उसके सिंथ प्लेयर्स जो कि अगले जनरेशन के कंपोजर, अगले जनरेशन के डायरेक्टर्स के साथ, प्रोड्यूसर्स के साथ काम कर रहे हैं, जो कि नेक्स्ट जनरेशन ऑफ टॉप कंपोजर्स है, वो लोग भी पूरे टाइम जिनका असिस्ट करते हैं उसके साथ सिंथ बजाए फिर रहे हैं. ठीक है, वो भी एलीट इंस्टीट्यूशन से है, प्रेसिडेंसी से है, नवोनालंदा से है, खुद कायस्थो है. ठीक है, ये बहुत अजीब सिचुएशन के बगैर नहीं होता है. लाइक ए वाज पॉइंटिंग आउट, इन अ सिचुएशन वेयर Brahmins who obviously have some kind of better education in their families than other families, if they are becoming your Swiggy and Zomato delivery boys and girls, and it's an improvement, then realize where the situation lies in our state, okay, the economics of our state, and see what stuff he's advocating for.
Part of it will be solved. That's the good news, I think. Okay. Just that's the demographer's point of view, but I think there is some truth to it. On the other side, I would say that I think again, rather than taxing, I think taxing profits are growing as a share of GDP in Korea as well, and wealth is growing as a share of GDP, and that both of those are direct targets of taxation. So I would say that my views are that you should take on wealth and profits. I think that's where all the leverage is.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have other questions, but we only have 3 minutes. So, well, maybe let's move on to this. So about racial inequality. So given the rapid demographic change, many people believe that Korea should pursue an
ओ बाप रे, अब रेशियल इनइक्वालिटी, इसमें अभिजीत बनर्जी क्या करेगा?
active immigration policy.
Yeah.
So we should admit high-skilled immigrants, for example. But there are also concerns that immigrants coming from Korea may take away jobs from Koreans. So also Korea is moving toward multicultural society. It has been very homogeneous society with a single race for a long time. So there is some hostility against immigrants. So some
और तब देखो कितना होमोजेनस और नाइस कल्चर रहता है कोरिया.
people even suggest that differentiated minimum wages should be provided to foreign workers to protect welfare levels of the existing Korean workers. So what would be appropriate policy for immigration?
I think most countries that have actually, I think the history of immigration is always this. The US, in Boston where I live, the Italians and the Irish, white people, were seen as being, they were described as being black people, as being, immigrants from Africa. The Italians were described as being, they're coming from Africa. There was prejudice, which then, of course, the Italians soon became integrated into society. And then
First and foremost reason for hating Italians was not their race or their skin color. It was because they were Catholics and USA was majorly Protestant.
the prejudice moved to the next group, the Mexicans or something. So I think the history of integration is always that there will be more fear and then you forget that was your fear and you start fearing something else. So that's I think one thing to say is that there's a long history of this. This other part of it is that I think that given how much Korea is going to age, whatever you do in a sense, and if you then want to introduce childcare and have an aging society, there's going to be huge demand for old age care and childcare. These are two jobs where you won't find enough people to do them. So I do feel that there is a real space and opportunity precisely because of that we need people. I mean, if you look at where the Syrians are working in Germany, they're working, a lot of them, the women especially, are working in old age care. Germany is also an aging economy, and that's not crazy.
Okay, thank you very much. I have other questions, but maybe I should stop here, and we'll take some questions from the floor. So, any questions?
Hello, Professor Banerjee and Professor Hong. I'm a grad from Cornell University, and I'm working at LG Corporation right now. My questions are twofold. So first, usually in development economics, we see high inequality and very high fertility rates. But in countries like China and Korea right now, we see persistent inequality and extremely low fertility rates. And I'm wondering how low fertility rates would be impacting inequality in the future in countries like Korea. And my second question is, you've mentioned low fertility rates and simultaneously rapid population aging. And do you see these two forces being inflationary or deflationary? Thank you.
Inflationary is mostly monetary policy. I don't think these are per se. I think the real issue, I think the one you're pointing to is the connection to inequality. And I think there are two directions. One is that I think it's what's going to do is it's going to eventually you'll have wages catching up because there's no way to workers will be scarce. The second thing is the intergenerational question will be critical because there'll be an aging population who will need not just money but services, and how will you redistribute money towards the elderly will be a critical part of the inequality story.
So another question? Okay.
Hello, thank you so much for your presentation. Lucha Sotomayor, I work for the UN on violence against children. I wonder what your position is regarding how the climate crisis is also affecting inequality and the future of inequality. Thank you.
Can I remind something to people on the climate crisis? Remember, guys, obesity will kill you before climate change.
I could, in fact, 2 days ago gave a 1-hour lecture on this, so I can go on and on. It's certainly going to be, I think, both in terms of the employment opportunities, is the world's poorest people who are going to suffer. It's very clear. The geography of the climate crisis is very, very clear. The poorest people will suffer, poorest people will die. And there is really right now almost no mechanism for redistributing at a scale that will need it to even mitigate this to a significant extent. So we're really facing staring.
Which is why Jordan Peterson's argument while discussing climate crisis, the exact thing he said was that we need to make sure that poor people become as rich as possible in as quick a time as possible. By making them richer does not mean redistributing to them wealth. See, nothing other than redistribution even comes to his mind in his vocabulary.
Into the barrel of a gun there.
Thank you very much. Given the time constraint, I think we should stop here. And do you have any final words?
Yeah, my only thing I want to say is that while I didn't paint a very cheering picture, I do want us to not lose hope. I think we lose hope, we are done. We need to keep trying. And I think
Yes, we won't lose hope that one day a free market guy will become our prime minister. Someone like Sanjeev Sanyal will become the prime minister. And you know in your hearts, guys, that Narendra Modi believes in everything he says, right? You know that, right? If you don't know that, that's going to be a bigger problem. So it's economic thinking like this, that poor people are going to suffer the most. Yes. So how to not keep them poor, which is why we need further upliftment in society, which will create further income inequality. But the poorer people will not be as poor as 5 minutes back. That's the main goal.
We as humanity have been creative. We need to solve this problem. All of you, many of you look very young to me. You have the responsibility of taking that on, finding solutions for the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's finish this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So wait, ये क्या शुरू हो रहा है फिर से? There's another video on this with someone else. Okay, then we'll have to look at this again some other day. So M. Shastri, the name of the video is this. Hope you go there and put all our in-house libertarians go there and comment your disagreements. Okay. So the video is called "The Future of Inequality." Abhijit Banerjee, MIT professor of economics. Why is he at MIT and not Calcutta University? Someone asked him. Anyway, so look at the very first comment, guys. Very first comment. The comment with highest numbers of likes. It's by a Bengali Kaisto. These levels of inequality is the root of most of the problems in country after country. Okay, guys. So in India, the problem is inequality, nothing else. India too is a prominent example of inequality in every aspect of life, be it income inequality, societal inequality, gender inequality, and many other issues and challenges. Still, the middle class is burdened with high taxes. Oh, achanak libertarian ban gaya. Both with direct and indirect taxes, and they are getting simply nothing in the name of tax. Oh, तुमको मिलना था भोसरी के टैक्स तुम्हारे लिए लिया जाता है, तुमसे टैक्स लेके तुमको ही वापस रिडिस्ट्रीब्यूट किया जाएगा. गांडू, वो इनइक्वालिटी चोदा रहे हो, इसलिए तुमसे टैक्स लिया जा रहा है. क्या गांडू इडियट है. अच्छा, Ghosh, very clear. That's the way the world has moved from 1980 onwards, following over. The problem and solution are both in human heart. Oh my God. With all his brilliance, there is more inequality and poverty today. What does this comment even mean? So well explained. We have a permanent growth economic model. Yeah. It's far too easy to predict with high confidence that a discussion among economists about inequality will include no mention of the idea of sharing natural wealth equally. Oh, the hippies are here, guys. Let's smoke a joint now. मुझे demonetize ना मत कर देना. Understood inequality much better than ever. Khurshid Akram has understood inequality much better than ever. Hope he changes his country, and I hope he's not from India. Also, the consequences of AI on the mid-level workforce. Love from India. Priyanshu Mukherjee, Mukhopadhyay. Insightful conversation. Okay. So guys, thank you for joining the live stream. Yeah, second video ना देखना पड़ेगा. ये और भी छोटा है. ठीक है, ये भी एक दिन हम कर लेंगे जल्दी से. Okay then, bye guys. Thank you for joining. Good night.
श्रवरूढं महाभीमं गुणाद्रष्टाङ्गरप्रदम् अस्य युक्तं त्रिनेत्रं च कपालकर्णिकाकरां मुक्तकेशीं ललज्जयः पिबन्तीं रुधिरं चतुर्बाहु समायुक्तं वराभयकरं स्मरेत्. चतुर्बाहु समायुक्तं वराभय स्वरे काली काली